So another PPS photo edit request, this one from Andrew Watkins, another landscape. We seem to like our landscapes over in Preston Photography Society, so let's see what we can do with this one. Just see where we start and end up. So this is the starting image. So if I'm looking at it, it looks relatively peaceful, calming and collective. I can see a couple of things in there that I would like to do. Possibly change the crop. There's a lot of not much happening in the sky up here. Just noticed we've got a little bit of vignetting coming in, possibly from a lens hood or the lens itself. So I'm just going to bring that down. Like there's a kind of lead in over to the lake going through here, so I want to emphasize that, and I want to try and bring this out at the rock, the foreground, out a little bit more and allow us to enjoy the landscape. Also bring a little bit more depth in there and warm it up a little bit to see this either setting or rising sun just catching the hills. So let's see what we can do. We're going to use Lightrooms for this one and we're going to jump in. So if I go straight into the develop module, first thing I always try and do with images is just scroll down right to the bottom and see whether we've got a camera lens correction on, and kind of always have these on by default, and it's useful to go and make sure that you've got your camera and lens choice all set up and ready to go. In this case it's all set up for, looks like Andrew uses an Nikon, and he's using an 18 to 105mm. So let's have a little look. That's set, leave that as it is, that's all I do there. And then it's a case of generally work from the top going down, but the first thing we're going to do here is just apply the crop just to get us a look that I'm kind of interested in seeing. We may adjust it later, but this is just our start of a 10. Bring it down. I mentioned kind of like we've got a lead in kind of going in here and from here, and also from the mountains over to this lake. So I just want to try and see if I can bring the corner to follow that up to the lake and see what happens. So I'm just going to pull down from the top left, see where we end up. Don't want to go too far. I'm liking the way it's just capturing the corner of the cloud here, just clipping the edge of the rock and tipping the lake, I think, thereabouts. Let's see if we can come in just a little bit more. Use this cloud here to help come in again, catching there, still clipping. Yeah, I kind of like that. I'll stick with that for the moment. Again, we may adjust later. So that's giving my basic crop to work with, and then let's see where we go from here. So we'll start with just doing something that can be quite an interesting thing. This will look rather extreme. I'm just going to remove all the highlights and fill in all the shadows, and we get something that's rather flat and bland. Don't worry, this will change as we go along. Just going to add in some white and brighter areas just to capture some of the lichen in here and a little bit in the clouds. And this is, I generally work by feel. There's no rule set here, so just add a little bit in. Let's see where we go up to. Just playing the feel. Probably stop around, just go down a little bit, stop around here, just making sure I don't clip anything. Need to bring a little bit more depth into it, so let's add a bit more shadow and a bit more of the blacks. Let's see, where should we go to? So just playing it by look and feel. I think there, we'll stop there. Then I always like to, it still looks a little bit flat for me and a little bit no depth to there. So I generally add a little bit more of the highlights back in again, just see how far they come, just a little bit. Pulling it down, just bring in a little bit more depth and feel. I'm just going to check the contrast. I'm relatively happy with that. We'll come back to these settings in a second. I'll just like to add a little bit more definition and depth to the image by adding a small S curve to our tone curve. That just brings in a little bit more contrast. Gone a little bit too far, I think. Let's bring that light up a bit, not too much. A little bit more. Here we go, I think I'm there about. Now this is just giving our overall settings to the image. I'm going to play with a few little bits and pieces to emphasize where I want us to be looking as we go through. Kind of liking the saturation and the vibrancy as it stands at the moment, so I'm not going to change that at all. Let's have a little look. I'm just going to bring the exposure down a little bit. Now let's just scroll down again. Where's our clarity? That's one of my default settings. I think I've got a little bit too much in there. I'm going to bring that down to around there. Overall, I want to, let's just check. Wait for it to sharpen up. Nice and sharp. I'm just going to add a little bit more texture into the overall image, just a little bit, nothing too severe. Just gives this a general kind of light sharpening in mid-tones, but not as severe or nasty as clarity can be. And let's just look through. Notice there's a bit of a haze going on there, so let's remove that and that'll give us a bit more contrast in those hills. So let's see what we can get there. Like I say, it's all look and feel, and that's starting to come in. If you notice all the tones and the colour temperature, it all starts to warm up whenever you're changing any of these settings. So changing the colour temperature is something I do relatively later in the process. Kind of liking that a little bit more. I think there, we'll stick with that. So as I mentioned, the colour temperature. One of the ways to do it is use the little dropper tool here. Find what would be your natural grey point or white point. I'm going to use the lichen tucked away in here as a starter. See what that feels like. Kind of liking that, nice and warm, warming feeling to it. The sun catching, coming off, looking quite naturally. Still looking, because it's just catching the heads there. There's still shadows in the valley, etc. But what we really want to do now is just draw some attention to the rock here and emphasize this leading line that I was talking about earlier on. So the way I'm going to do this is use some of the local adjustment tools. So in this case I'm just going to use the brush, and I'm going to be rather crude, so I want to lighten it, change to lighten. I'm going to be rather crude just to begin with, and I'm just going to paint over the area where I want it lightened. We just have a little look around that bit, and that'll be crude, it's probably bleeding over. If you click down here you'll see where it's going, and I'm just going to erase around the edges where I don't want it touching too much. That's generally, it's as versions of Lightroom have come and gone, this facility has got a lot better. It used to be rather horrible. So let's just switch that off. So in theory all we're doing is changing this rock area. What I want to do to begin with is just already lightened it a little bit. I think we'll add a little bit more texture in there just to help draw you in, and just add a little bit more into the highlights and to the whites. And I think we'd actually, what I want to do, the background's relatively warm. I'm going to try and make this slightly cooler, bring out the blues, etc. in the rocks, and that will help it stand out a little bit more. So I'm just going to cool it down a little bit. Just cooling this bit down, and say OK to that. See how that looks. Not quite happy with that. I'm going to add a bit more temperature to the overall image. I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit, not too much. There we go. And let's add another brush. I'm just going to lighten some areas, just pure light in this case. I'm just going to drag and drop, and just notice my web color didn't save that, did it? I didn't hit the done button. Let's just correct that. So I'm just following the hill around, just adding a little bit more light into this area. So we can switch that on and off, you can see the effect. So this is all the local brush tools going back and forth. Just going to tone this one down a little bit. I want it being rather subtle, so just a slight hint. And I just want to check, it looks as though I might have, yeah, I don't, so this isn't quite going where I want it to. Bring it down here. Just going to erase that bit at the top there that I didn't want. Catching the top of the hills. Don't want it catching there, I want that to remain relatively dark and sweep around. So just as though it would be catching. There we go. And I'm just going to add one more just to darken around here a little bit. So I'm just going to get from the drop down, go to darken, and just add a little darken down around this bottom corner a little, just to try and keep you locked into the image. So let's switch that off. That's a little bit too much. It looks too heavy-handed. So well, it's all a case of being subtle. So check it on, check it off. A little bit more there, I think. That should do it. Check it on, check it off, check it on. And that's us there or there about done. Let's just check right down at the bottom, just for sharpening. Let's default settings a little bit much. We don't need too much noise. I don't think there's any noise going on here, so we can reduce that down quite well. Yeah, that's fine. I just want to try and boost the background. You saw me pull out, make that a lot bluer, colder. Let's see if we can just add a little bit more colour into this. I'm going to play around with the hue. I'm just going to try and boost the reds and the oranges a little. So we'll start with moving up into reds. A little bit more orangey, not too much. There we go, balancing quite well there. And I'm just going to take those yellows more down towards the oranges again. Again, look and feel a little bit more orange, I think. I quite like that. The aquas, just going to change the aquas, shift those over more towards a bluer tone. The same with the blue, going to shunt that up to the darker blues and away from the aquas. And then purple, let's just bring that down a little tad. Quite liking the look and feel for that. Saturation, just going to boost these oranges a little just to help draw emphasis to that. And the luminance again, I'm going to boost the oranges and yellows just a little bit just to draw attention. Just a little bit. And that's me done, I think. Let's just check that crop again. Am I still happy with that crop? Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. And that is that. So it's from that to that. And let's call that one a day.